I'm thrilled to officially start our event today with Depop, Breaking Tech Barriers, Candid Conversations with Depop Women Engineers. And I'm thrilled to welcome our panelists, Helene Henrichsen, a Senior Platform Engineer at Depop, Dekker, a Data Platform Engineer also at Depop, and Salma Kanani, who is an MLOps engineer. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, to our panelists. So to get started, I would love for you all to introduce yourselves. You can just share a little bit about your role, when you joined Depop, and kind of a little bit more specifically about your areas at Depop. Anna, we can start with you.
Thanks. Hello, everybody. My name is Dekker. I joined Depop last year. I work here as a data platform engineer in one of Depop's data teams. And my team is primarily responsible for the data infrastructure and for making sure that all data processes regarding machine learning, marketing, analytics, and reporting run reliably. Before that, I worked in Amsterdam as a data engineering consultant, which allowed me to explore different clouds, different data use cases, and it got me really thrilled about data engineering. So I'm really happy to share my experience today with you.
Let's pass it over to Salma.
Hi, everyone. I'm Salma. My pronouns are she, her. I'm from Tunisia. I joined Depop as an MLOps engineer last September, so almost 6 months now. It's been very exciting, and I'm very thrilled to be here, actually. And for those of you who don't know, MLOps engineering started to emerge a few years ago because more and more companies started to use machine learning in their products. So you can think of MLOps as that secret sauce that ensures your fancy AI model is actually robust enough to work in the real world. So it's like DevOps, but for a machine learning project. It takes care of deploying, monitoring, managing these models in production, making sure that they stay performant over time. And when they are not anymore, it's fairly easy to update them with better ones. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
And last but certainly not least, of course, Helene.
So my name is Helene Henrichsen. I'm from Norway, but I've always worked in London. So I joined Depop about 6+ months ago as a senior platform engineer. Just to make that sound more understandable, platform engineering is kind of based on DevOps principles. So in the past, I've been a DevOps engineer and a cloud engineer, and those kind of things kind of go together. So it just means we take care of mainly our developers. They're our dear users, so we want them to be very happy. And so we just take care of infrastructure and CI/CD processes and security and loads of other things. But yeah.
So you all touched on this a little bit, but one thing that was cool to me, at least, when we were preparing for this event was kind of both the specificity of your roles and then kind of like the robust different areas of engineering at Depop. So we'll start with Salma. If there's anything else, you talked a little bit about it already, but do your roles intersect as well? Or Salma, like, who else does your role intersect with, and what areas of the business do you support? And then we'll hear from everybody.
Right. So I guess they all contribute to the development of a service and potentially data-driven products by like providing the infrastructure and processes. But from an MLOps perspective, I like to think of it as a practice that makes the data scientists' lives much easier. So for instance, at Depop, our team basically strives to provide this paved path for the data science team to be able to easily train test and deploy and like track their models in production. So yeah.
And Anna, the same question.
Yeah, I think it's quite funny because I'm a customer of Helen's team and I'm sort of a provider for Salma's team. So I'm right in between. And I think it's a very interesting interaction because, for example, Helen provides some sort of guardrails for certain cloud retimes that configuration matches or doesn't match. And then I contact Helen's team about some questions that I have. And I think because we are all sort of platform teams, we make sure that our users have the best developer experience and that if they want to ship something to production, they can do it as fast as possible.
And Helen.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think as a platform engineer, you're kind of there's a good saying for this that I can't remember, but like you have hands in each pot or something like that. So you work with any type of engineer, data engineers, more kind of security focused people, as well as kind of, your more average developer person. We have like production teams is what we call them. So they're kind of like what we focus the most on because I think the ones we have maybe the most of, and they're the ones shipping features and kind of, when you see Depop as a user, those are kind of like the clear things that you see, and those are the ones we work with the most. But yeah, we kind of work with everybody. And also non-technical people as well, like product and yeah, like auditors, things like that.
We'll definitely get more in some of our later questions about the skills needing to like work across non-technical teams as well. But it's very clear that all of you like your roles at Depop. So what would you say that you enjoy the most? Or another way you could answer it is like when you first saw the job description, what attracted you to that role? And Helen, I'll actually pass it to you first.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so I mean, my previous experience was working in payments, and I worked in one of the big four consultancies, so KPMG. That's kind of where I started. And those are a bit more, don't want to offend any of these people, obviously, but like a bit more corporate places, I would say, in my experience. I love product companies because I feel like you kind of have a common goal within the business. So every single person, technical or not, work towards making this product great. And I love like kind of like coming together as almost like a community, like, yes, like we can make this so good. And then Depop specifically, I was kind of, again, based on where I came from, looking for companies that basically had more women in it. So there is, I don't know if this is UK specific or not, but there's like a recruiting platform you can go, and they tend to kind of show very clearly percentage of women, for example, in the company. And Depop happens also to have a female CEO. So things like that was very, very interesting to me to kind of get a feeling of how that would be coming from places where there is a bit more majority, male employees. So yeah.
I loved that you pointed out, because there's a lot of job seekers in the audience, like some things to look for, and then also to keep in mind like what kind of company it is, because I think the idea of like looking whether you want to go to a product company or not is very interesting for sure. I saw you, Anna, nodding along, so I'll pass the question to you next.
Yeah, so after spending several years in consultancy, I really wanted to work in a product company to experience that side and to see how all the dynamics flow there. And I was really amazed by Depop's mission, the sustainability of it. That resonated a lot with me. And when I was interviewing, I learned about like the really big engineering group out there, and that so much is automated, and that makes your job just really amazing because you can benefit from a lot of tools that have been built that makes life easier. That really was important to me.
And Salma.
Yeah, so I guess what really drew me to this role at Depop was the fact that they had a dedicated MLOps team. So as you may know, like MLOps is still quite fresh in the industry, and depending on the company's size and their product as well, finding a dedicated team like this is not that common. So yeah, it can become, or it can be quite isolating. So at Depop, I'm part of a team where we all are all aligned to the same towards the same goal. We get to share like different perspectives and ideas on a daily basis, which has been and continues to be actually a really fruitful learning experience for me, especially at this point in my career. So yeah, that was very appealing.
I would love to talk a little bit more about that. I actually will start with you, Salma, because you mentioned like they actually had a specific like MLOps team. When it's new in the industry, I am seeing like a lot more like certificates in MLOps like pop up for the first time, all that kind of stuff. So one question that we get from members a lot is always the generalist versus specialist question. So it does seem like all of you have specialized in some way, and I would love to hear more about that journey and how you arrived at that choice to specialize. But I'm going to start with you, Salma, because you already started talking about it a little bit, and then we'll go to Anna.
Sure, yeah. So I come from a software engineering background. I personally started my career as a software engineer in the broader sense. I was part of an R&D team, so we worked on different phases of the project, which was a really learning experience for me, considering that I was like a junior, so I didn't really know much. So yeah, at that point, I considered myself being a generalist for some time. And then I was introduced to the MLOps field through when I had the opportunity to basically coach an internship that revolved around getting a machine learning pipeline into production, which was really interesting, and it made me think that actually I'm very interested in, or I'm very excited about the tasks that are mainly optimizing and automating processes, and that's why I decided like to be more specialized in this field. It's still like a broad relatively broad field, but yeah, it's a specialty, like it's not software engineering in general, but yeah.
And what about you, Anna?
Yeah, I've had quite an unusual trajectory because I studied econometrics, which is mathematical statistics. And although I really love to do these mathematical derivations, I felt that programming was a bit more sort of current day skills that is needed. So I transitioned into data science. And when I was doing data science, I was really curious on how to productionize models and how to get user feedback, etc. So that really lured me into data engineering, and I learned more and more about it. And so yeah, that gradually sort of shaped my career path. And I think what has helped me along the way is sort of having a curiosity-driven focus. So I wanted to learn things about security, and then I delved a bit into the security part. And what is also helpful is that I followed a traineeship that gave me trainings about important topics within engineering that helped me to strengthen my base. And I think, yeah, if you at least know how to debug or where to search for, it always helps. But yeah, it's a bit hard to say whether like specializing or not is the best. But if you can shape your own track, it's very nice.
Yeah. And what about you, Helene? I also, when we were preparing, like I found out that you have a degree in international business. So how did did your studies also help you narrow in on? We would love to hear more about that path as well.
Yeah, I mean, sort of similarly to Anna, I didn't really study what I do. So most of my colleagues, not everyone, but most come more from a computer science background. So that's kind of a fairly normal degree to enter the field that I work in. And like you said, I didn't study that. I studied international business, and I followed the more normal track when you're in that kind of degree. It's usually kind of like either you want to be an investment banker or a consultant, and I didn't want to be an investment banker, so I went to consultancies, and then got a job at, like I said, KPMG as a, I think, management consultant at the time, like more of the graduate program that they run. And then it wasn't until I actually joined, like physically, that they said, no, you know what, you're not going to be a management consultant. You're going to work in the DevOps team, which I had no idea what meant. I had never really planned on working in technology, specifically as an engineer. Didn't really know what cloud outside of iCloud on my phone was. So yeah, joining this field, I mean, you know, I think any job, when you're a junior, you're learning kind of as much as you can, meaning you're a generalist in a sense. Like it's hard to become a specialist immediately. Within cloud, there's also so many things to kind of latch on to. You know, it's not just the cloud providers, which are also different, but the things within them, what kind of specific services that they provide. You can go into data, you can go into security, you can go into more like delivery focused, you know, methods of delivering. So my degree, I think, has helped in the sense that I am a little bit different to the people I usually work with anyway. I think diversity that's kind of what it's shown me, because you started off quite insecure with like, oh, I don't have a computer science degree. Help, like I don't know how to code. I don't really know what any of this stuff means. But you know, like sticking with it a little bit and just kind of like pushing through that insecurity, at least that was my experience, helped so much. And I think you don't need to have a degree necessarily, but what it helped me a lot with was that I learned how to learn when I did my degree. So I don't use that many business kind of specific things in my day to day, but I know how I can learn quickly because I know like my way of learning. And that's been extremely useful, despite having like a bit of a different degree than most. So I think that's the main takeaway there. You can kind of learn whatever you want. It's just stick with it, even when it's a bit difficult.
Yeah, I love that you pointed out knowing how to learn. I feel like that's like one of the most important things about this industry.
Yeah.
So I mean, connected to that, for Salma and Anna, is there any skills like that you took from maybe different parts of your life, or any skills that you were surprised that you're using as an engineer, that you didn't know you were going to use ahead of time? I'll start with Salma.
So yeah, from me personally, I think I was surprised to learn how important to work in a team. Before I had this misconception of, you know, software engineering being a solitary activity, but the truth is it's true, like we spend a significant amount of time working independently compared to other fields. But yeah, collaboration and teamwork is very important to one's success. And yeah, in my experience, I think it's very important to work in a team because of the diverse perspectives you get, which ultimately you know, leads to more innovation and more creation, which is great. So yeah, it's not a solitary activity.
What about you, Anna?
Yeah, what really surprised me is the creative aspect of the job. So I feel often as a sort of crafter or a painter that is just building out something rough and ugly first, and then iteratively making it beautiful and well tested and meeting the user demands. So yeah, that was not something that I would have known before, and I think it's a very nice part of the job because there are so many feedback cycles, and you learn how to improve and to make something better in a sort of efficient way. Yeah, and it's just very nice to do, because you get really visible and tangible results. For example, certain cost savings if you improve, or a certain velocity that you reach by improving something, and that makes your work very fulfilling, because at the end of the day you have a really concrete impact that you deliver. So yeah.
I think Salma started talking about this a little bit, about collaboration and different perspectives and things like that. And as our audience can see, like, this is a very international panel. Everyone's working on an international team. That's always the case. We've gotten to work with Depop before. Everyone is always coming from a different background. So one thing that I always think is so interesting to hear from engineers is, what is something before started, you know, your international working or studying journey, what is something that you wish you knew before working across cultures? And I'll actually start with Helene first.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of challenges I think you face when you start off like that. I think for me, one of the things I learned fairly early on is it's almost like learning about yourself, in a sense, from other people's perspectives becomes very clear very quickly. So I think as a Norwegian, we have a bit of a tendency, just to go, no stereotype here, but to be quite direct. And I kind of had to learn that I can come across as a bit, you know, yeah, direct and scary maybe for some people when I'm really passionate about something as well. But it's that kind of, I don't know what to call it, like art almost, or like balance between reading a room, right? Like when you're working in a team, like I'm working in a fully international team, so there's things like acronyms, for example, that are used a lot. I think I get the feeling, I don't know if this is true, but in the UK it's quite normal to use a lot of acronyms. I usually don't know what they mean, even when it's like a joke. I have an English manager, and he loves to use loads of like very specific English jokes, and he doesn't always understand. Like we don't know what they mean. So just kind of like being aware that, like, you know, there are some specific things about yourself that might not be obvious to everybody else. So just like, you know, be clear in your communication. And I just personally like to make sure that like people are, you know, comfortable in the way that we communicate within our team, or like the team I work in. So yeah, I think that's like something you learn pretty quickly.
I can attest that in the US, we use a lot of acronyms as well. So
Okay,
maybe
cool.
it's an English language thing.
Yeah, so I recently read The Culture Map, which I found a very handy book, and also super interesting to learn about all the cultural differences. And I think it's always nice to keep that in mind when you're in a room with different cultures, to ensure that everybody feels respected and heard and listened to. And perhaps one learning that I had in my career is that sometimes you feel a bit negative about not finishing a certain task on time, and then it's very tempting to keep it with you instead of sort of opening up about it and just flagging it with your manager what kind of problems you encounter, because sometimes things look super easy and then they are the hardest thing to do, or the hardest thing is the easiest thing to do. And it can be very hard to judge that from the outside if you do not communicate clearly about it. So escalating early, reaching out for help, and yeah, sort of bringing your struggle to the team has been super helpful. And also make sure that if there are sort of cultural struggles, that they are minimized just because you're very open about it.
Yeah, so you know how things get kind of lost in translation? I feel like when you're speaking like at work a language that isn't your first, it's totally possible that you might not get your point across exactly as you wished or meant to. also, when you speak a different language, your voice changes, which could make something sound unintentionally rude. So it's really important to remember this when communicating, whether it's you or your colleague who's speaking a second language at work. Just keep in mind this to avoid like misunderstandings, because that's not the point. It's just the language that is not translating it correctly, you know. So
yeah, thank you. And I have to second Anna's book recommendation. I put it in the chat for anyone in the audience as well, because it is a very, very helpful book, especially if you're interested in becoming a people manager in technology. So the next question I have, it's kind of a similar vein about what you wish you knew ahead of time, but what would you have told your younger self about working in this industry? We can start with Anna.
Yeah, so I never imagined myself to become a software programmer ever when I was young, because I really had the idea that you needed to game a lot in order to be successful. And the only gaming I did was Roller Coaster Tycoon and The Sims. So I didn't feel qualified. And actually it was totally nonsense, because I think everybody can learn how to code. It's a very nice skill, because you can really track your progress, and sometimes it's hard because you're stuck and then you have bugs, and it can feel very frustrating, but you get a lot of endorphin when you are actually managing to succeed in it. And it's just so nice what kind of opportunities it brings, because you can work in any industry. It has been super fulfilling. So I would everybody to encourage to learn, and it's a process. You have to make small steps, but it's enormously fulfilling and very exciting job. So don't feel ever limited in thinking that you're not good enough to code or anything like that.
What about you, Helene?
Yeah, kind of similar, really. I think I wish, like little Helen, when she joined KPMG, I wish she'd kind of maybe known that although, yes, this is a very technical job, there are a lot of technical, skills involved in what I do day to day, but there's also a lot of important non-technical skills that are really valuable in this job, such as good communication, problem-solving skills, teamwork. Those things are invaluable in any team, I think. So I wish I kind of had known, how valuable they would have been earlier. So when I started getting imposter syndrome when I was more a junior engineer, I could have understood that, you know what, like, okay, maybe you're not the best coder, for example, but you have other skills that are just as valuable and will definitely like help you get to where you want to be. So yeah.
We have some nice comments in the chat. Everyone is like seeing themselves in this story, that everyone has done imposter syndrome, like, and you're never gonna feel ready, so just do it. I love that. Thank
So
you.
true.
And also, like, maybe it's okay to be an imposter, because like, how else, like, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
What about you, Salma?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something regarding the imposter syndrome, is that it's usually correlated after like an achievement. So like you should have more confidence in yourself to actually believe that you were there not just by chance, but by it's actually an achievement and you should celebrate it. So yeah, but for me, I think the thing that I wish I knew, or I wish I learned earlier, was that there's a thin layer between being a perfectionist and being attentive to details. So it's fairly easy to go the rabbit hole of trying to perfect your work and never actually getting a solution that works end to end. So figuring out this distinction between the two was something that I really had to work hard to learn. Another downside of perfectionism is actually you will be like, while working on this task that you want to be so perfect, you're actually missing out other opportunities to work on different tasks, which like is a blocker for you to evolve and learn more. So yeah, what I do basically is try to time box a task, try to make it like try to time box a task to make it ready, and then if I have more time, I can try to perfection it a bit further. But the highest priority, or the first priority, is always making something that is working end to end. Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean, I know that I can see in the chat that there are other perfectionists in the audience. I'm sure also that I can imagine that working on like a product company can help combat some of those issues, because like you have to do it. Like people use Depop every single day.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, the theme of this event is misconceptions, and we talked a little bit about it. Like, I didn't think, I would say, Anna, though, you starting out in Sims is like a very similar story that many people in our community, like the Sims to engineer path is like very well tread. But, you know, we've talked a little about misconceptions, things that you didn't know before, but, you know, we all are complex people that live lives and have connections to people who are not in technology. And so I really liked this question that we had, which is, what do your friends or your parents or your, you know, family get wrong about your job? What do they think that you do? And we can start with you, Helene.
I mean, there are many things. I don't think any of my parents or my like friends outside of this industry, let's say, even could say what I do if you asked them today. But I think, I mean, because like when I try to explain what I do to people that don't understand technology, or you know cloud, for example, which is, you know, obviously most, that's fine. They just kind of like leave that conversation thinking, oh, she's like an IT like support person, like the kind of people you talk to on Microsoft Chat, or you know, that kind of stuff. So my parents also very much so love to call me with any kind of computer related problem that I don't necessarily know how to solve. I am not good at fixing computers. So I think, yeah, things like
I'll
that.
pass it to you, Salma, next.
Yeah, I think when I try to explain what I do, that people would think that I work in AI for some reason. And I'm like, yeah, I just make it accessible to you. I don't do the AI part. And then the follow-up question would be, do you work like something like ChatGPT or something like that? And I'm like, not really, but thanks. So yeah, they also ask me if ChatGPT will take out my job, which is not the case. It's just a tool that will help you be more performant, but that's it, really.
We'll close out this question with you, Anna.
Yeah, sometimes people think that you are almost like a magician typing some weird language on a computer that nobody understands except you. I think that's a really big misconception, because everything you write should be understandable by all your colleagues, hopefully, because your code is more read than it's actually written. So if you make something that it's very easy to interpret, you will help everybody a lot. And I also think that in general, like most concepts that you work on are very explainable. You can always find a sort of real life mimicking example that clarifies it a lot. So although the work sounds abstract, you can always translate it to like a user of Depop kind of example that people can relate to, and actually sort of understand what you're doing. So for example, in my work as ensuring that our data lake is reliable, we want to make sure that the same item is not sold twice, because then our users would fight for a product, and that should not be possible. So these kind of examples really help people to understand that your job is actually quite tangible and not really some sort of abstract thing that's only happening on your computer.
I think, Anna, you actually started answering my next question a little bit. We've been like talking around communication the whole time. And yeah, a couple of people in the chat are also saying like, people should be able to understand your code. So there's so many different like parts of communication in engineering, and I'm sure in your role as well. So Anna, if you could talk a little bit more about that, where do you see communication as most important for an engineer?
It's super important that you are able to work with different teams and to get your message across. And for example, if your team is trying to set a different standard because of a certain motivation, it should be clear to everybody why you want to use that and what's actually the value for the company. Because in the end, we are serving people that are trading their secondhand clothes, and yeah, there should always be sort of a direct relation with our end customers. And it can be really helpful if you make a visualization or another diagram that clearly explains what your piece of work is trying to achieve. And yeah, I think it helps so much in getting a project done if people feel that the message resonates with them, and that they have a sort of a buy-in into the project. So I think communication is very important within engineering, and yeah.
And what about you, Helen?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest kind of things about communication is feedback. So there are many different ways that we give feedback in like my day-to-day role, for example. So an easy example is you write some code to get that released to production. You need to open a pull request, meaning somebody will look at this code and review it to see if it is up to standard. Is it doing kind of best practice depending on what you're building or writing, and loads of other kind of variables there. But it means that you as a reviewer and the code writer has to be quite clear about, why am I doing this? What is it for? What impact does it have? And then so I can understand as a reviewer why this code is here in the first place in front of me. And then I need to be clear in my communication in terms of, because sometimes it's not always good feedback, right? Like sometimes it's like, oh, you didn't follow our standards, or you know what, that's not correct. You need to do this. So again, it's important to be, honest, clear communication delivered in sort of the right way, right? So you don't like make people sad because we don't want to do that. And this kind of goes for anything like brainstorming new products or features, talking to your team about like process related things, just honest, clear communication and kind of building. It's a skill, I would say, right? Like how you give feedback. So building that type of skill is I think really important in this job.
Yeah, and what about you, Salma?
Yeah, I totally second Helen and Anna of what they just said. Communication is key, no doubt. I don't think I've ever heard someone complaining about over communicating. So yeah, it's super important. One other thing I think it's important is documentation. As much as we like reading good documentation, we hate writing it, but we should still do that, because whether it's a design document, a proposal, a run book, documenting our, like being able to document the work that's been done is essential, because it basically helps everyone understand what's being built, why it's done that way, and yeah, it will allow others to build upon it. So yeah, one other thing is, yeah, writing documentation, communicating your work through documentation.
Yeah, I love that like quote from you that we all like reading good documentation, but no one likes writing it, but then someone has to write it. So I completely agree that learning how to do that is extremely important. It will make you a better engineer and a better teammate as well. So, we talked about communications, we talked about misconceptions. I'd like to hear a little bit more about some of the unique challenges that you feel like you've come across, whether it's in communication or, your entry into the career. We're not quite ready for audience questions. However, I am seeing already that a bunch of people have asked, like, what barriers did you feel like you faced, or what do you notice like that stops maybe other young women from wanting to be in engineering as well? So I think let's try to answer, however you interpret the challenges. I would love to hear some of your experiences of working through challenges. And we can start with, how about you, Anna?
Yeah, so I see one question from Adriana. What are some of the barriers you have observed that women face in the software industry? So I've had quite many situations in which I was the only woman at the table, and yeah, it's always a bit harder if you don't see like a role model that looks like you, talks like you, acts like you. So you can feel a bit alone, but what really helped me is also to think about what kind of diversifying value you bring by having a different background, a different communication style, or just something that makes you unique to the team, and to really think and act from that as a strength rather than as an insecurity. And I think it's also very, very nice and special to still be not highly represented in this industry, because we can really help paving the way for the generations that will follow, because I think ultimately this will be a job that will be like attractive to any type of person. So just taking on your role and trying to sort of promote the fun in this industry is I think a very nice goal to contribute to.
To you, Salma. I love people in the audience. Everyone's doing great support by all the answers, by the way. Yeah, I'm excited to see, Salma, if you have any challenges you'd like to discuss.
I think one of the biggest challenges, yeah, in my, like, not just in my daily job, but in software engineering in general, is maybe ensuring an accurate understanding of the project requirements. So like, again, miscommunication usually leads to missed requirements, which can also lead to like a derailed project. So it's really crucial to establish this clear communication channels, actively listen, ask for clarifying questions, because it's very important. Even if you feel that the question is silly, it's better to ask it rather than keep it and then misunderstand something. And then again, thoroughly document your requirements to basically avoid delays and unnecessary work. I think being able to get the requirements right is one challenge that we face quite often.
Yeah, we have an audience member saying that one of the first tasks that she got at a new job was documentation, and it was exhausting, but was like so vital to actually understand the whole company and things like that. So you have other pro documentation people in this audience. What about you, Helen?
Yeah, I think Salma's point is really interesting. I think it's something I've kind of learned over the last few years that's become so important in everything we do. I'm sure it kind of goes into all teams, but I feel like platform is something we need to focus a lot on all the time. Because I think I mentioned it earlier when I was trying to describe my role, but developer experience is kind of like a key metric almost. Like, how happy are our developers with what we kind of give them in order to do their job? And therefore, getting user feedback is a big challenge because, or maybe not getting the feedback necessarily, but how we do it. And then, you know, our job is kind of like building things, building products almost, right? Like enabling people to do certain things, even if it's faster or more secure or just better quality, like kind of automatically, you know, that's sort of some of the things that we try and build for our users. But then it's very easy to build something in isolation because we're like, oh yeah, we think they have that problem, and so we'll fix it. And then we'll spend months doing it potentially, or at least like, let's say, a good few weeks. So that's, you know, money, resources, time, etc., being spent on building something. But when we don't really ask our users, like, hey, is this, like, do you like this? Does that make sense to you? Does it kind of solve the problem that you have? I've seen that so many times where we just spend so much time building things that we think are the solution to a problem we thought people had. And then we're done and we're like, hey guys, like, we did this amazing thing, you know, use it, move towards it. And then nobody does it. And we're like, wait, what? Like, this is amazing. Why aren't people using it? And it's a conversation I hear over and over and over again. And it's just like, it's just simply getting people into the building or like a part of the process when you're building something new or changing something that already exists, making sure that it's, you know, fit for purpose. And sometimes I feel like us platform engineers we just like, oh yeah, we know what the problem is because we're engineers too. But often the case, I see that that's not really true. So that's a big challenge we face. Just to drag this on a little bit extra, because I just want to add it, because I know we talk about it all the time, but like, just on more like a personal note as well, completely different to more like day to day. I definitely struggled with like imposter syndrome so bad when I started out. Like, oh my God, I like almost didn't want to continue this job because I just thought like, I am so bad at this job. You know, a lot to do with the fact that I didn't study this and came in completely fresh. But like, again, like I said, like if you just stick with it, I think, and like, you know, talk about it as well. Like, I think you find all the time that like everyone's like, yeah, me too, me too. That just helps so much because I know it's like it's a hard industry sometimes, particularly when you're underrepresented, like Anna mentioned as well. So that's just like, I think so key. Just like stick with it and like talk to people and yeah.
Thank you. We have a bunch of people asking about that. So we already got one audience question down. So thank you so much, Helene. And I completely agree. Before we change over to the audience questions, I'd like to kind of close out our planned questions to talk a little bit about Depop. I mean, as you are all talking about getting your role, we know like what attracted you. That really speaks a lot to the culture, but I would love to also hear about, you know, both company or engineering culture as well, because Depop really does have a very robust, complex engineering ecosystem, which is really unique, at least in the companies that I know. So let's start with you, Salma, to talk a little bit about the culture.
Yeah, I think probably Anna and Helen will second me on this, but Depop actually encourages people to keep a brag document. So basically a brag document is where you keep track of all your work and what you've achieved. At first, for me, it felt a bit like a drag to constantly like keep writing about my work and what I've done. But then I actually found it a good opportunity to basically reflect on what I've done so far and what I've achieved and maybe what I could have done better maybe. And I think it's also good to go back in, I don't know, like 6 months time and see the impact and the progress that you've made. And maybe again, like try to chase away that imposter syndrome because you have proof now. So yeah.
What about you, Anna?
Yeah, what I really love about Depop's engineering culture is that there are so many experienced engineers that are willing to share their insights or answer questions. If I have a question, I'm always searching Slack to see if anyone experienced the same, or otherwise reaching out. And what I really like is that you're really supported and awarded for taking initiative. So there are a lot of engineers here that see a problem, tackle it, write a proposal, verify it with users, and then if they succeed, it's amazing how the feedback is. I've never seen a company sending so many happy emoticons in meetings. It's just incredible. And I think that really contributes to a really positive vibe in which you're backed when you make a mistake, but also like really applauded for when you make a valuable contribution to the company. And yeah, another example of the entrepreneurial character is the Hack Week that we did recently, in which everybody in the company was allowed to work in a different setup for a week on an initiative that has potential to provide a valuable feature for the company. And it was really amazing to see what people came up with, and also how much of it was actually in production at the end of the week, which is incredible for such a short period of time, and super inspiring to see and experience.
And then Helene.
Yeah, I think one of the things I really liked, and I actually liked it before I even started here, it was something that drew me in a little bit as well, where during the interview process, my now manager was talking a lot about Depop values, and kind of tying it into mental health and well-being and things like that. Sometimes it can be a bit it completely depends on the company and the time, et cetera, but sometimes you end up in a bit of a stressful situation. So I've definitely experienced times where it was just a bit much. And I think this is something Depop seems to just excel in, like really like thinking about it, caring about it, more importantly, because people do talk about this a lot, but don't necessarily put action to the words. And Depop just, at least like in my environment, it's just like really well taken care of, which is so refreshing, and it just makes you feel so safe and comfortable, which I think is super, super important in this industry. So that's one of the things I really like about Depop.
Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all of these amazing questions. We tried to put some in throughout, like talked on a lot of the themes on imposter syndrome, things like that. But something that we didn't talk about yet is the interviewing process. So I'd love to finish today there. I'm also going to share on the screen the key takeaways. The lovely team at Depop created a slide for us all of the key takeaways for today. But what I noticed in the chat is that, it's software engineering interviews are very difficult. Studying for them is difficult. And you can feel fatigued, like burnout, all of those things. Since you all mentioned you're newer to Depop, so you went through an interview process more recently. Like, what are some strategies you had, whether it's studying, like self-care while you're going on a lot of interviews? We'll stuck to those two areas, like studying or self-care, because I feel like the mental fortitude is part of the biggest challenge. So I'll go Salma, Anna, and then Helene.
To be honest, like the interviewing process was one of the least stressful interviews that I had, because like it was I'm talking about the technical interview here. It was basically giving me a problem and allowing me to like search on Google if I don't know how to write or like call a certain function and something like that, which is like something that they have emphasized on from the beginning of the interview, which, as you know, like on your daily job, you're not gonna write code from scratch. You're gonna just look it up on the internet and basically copy paste the bit that you need. So having that opportunity during the interview made it less stressful. It was like more of a discussion as well. Like it wasn't like just me talking, reciting what I'm like the problematic or like the solution. It was just more of a natural discussion that you would have with a colleague. So yeah, in terms of preparation, I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't have an answer to that. But yeah, from my own experience, the interview process was quite good. So yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a great answer. And it really shows a lot about the culture that you've all been talking about. So I'll pass it to Anna. It could be about this particular interview, but I would imagine you've had to do other ones, or maybe you were interviewing at other companies as well. So I'll pass it to Anna.
Yeah, so I really agree with Salma. I really liked that it was a very natural discussion here. It's not that the interviewer was sitting back and just waiting, where you were sort of struggling yourself through the problem. Instead, it was a really natural discussion indeed. And what I found really helpful is, if you have to solve a certain problem, is just to start simple and then iteratively improve it, and always keep talking about it and making sure you stay in touch with the interviewer and not lose that connection, because once you do, you are so much up in your head and not really in the interview. Whereas if you stay in touch with the interviewer and the problem, it's likely easier to solve. And what I also want to mention is that this industry often has so many weird requirements. For example, knowing a skill for more years than it existed. And it's really daunting to see what kind of requirements sometimes you have to meet. But what I also think is that the tools you're working with and the coding languages, the knowledge is usually very transferable. So if you know like one cloud, you can always relate to the other ones. Or if you know one language, you know something about our languages as well. So I would really focus on what you have experience with, or what you just know from previous use cases, and bring that to the table. Share what problems you encountered and how did you overcome that, because I think even the most experienced engineers wouldn't meet certain requirements for a job. And practicing with lead code assignments is very handy to learn about some concepts. But what was really nice at Depop, we didn't have to solve a really weird search algorithm that you would never actually use in your job. You got a very realistic puzzle to solve, and I think that's nice, because you test whether somebody has a good problem-solving skill, and not whether somebody is able to deliver in one go an algorithm he will never work with, probably. So I think what characterized Depop interviews was that it was very realistic.
And then we'll have no pressure, Helene, but we'll close it out with you with your experience.
Oh, no worries. I mean, there's so many I think tips and tricks you can kind of go for, and it also depends on I would say the seniority. I mean, I remember when I started out looking for my first job within this industry after KPMG, one thing that really helped me was kind of using people I knew for practice to interview. So they would be the interviewer and I would be the interviewee, because I would again feel a bit insecure about my skill level. So I kind of wanted to nail down how I presented myself in an interview. And then they can also come up with questions and things relevant to your industry. So that can be nice. Other things, I don't really practice for technical tests and things like that, because they're always, usually in my experience, they're very different company to company. I think it's important to think about the fact that the people that are interviewing you are not there to make you feel nervous or make you feel uncomfortable. They're there to see if they want to work with you. That's the important thing. So if you don't know the answer to a question, or you don't know like this type of technology that they started talking about, I don't think that's the important thing, because like we said earlier, you can learn anything, and people that are interviewing are usually, hopefully, really aware of that, particularly when it comes to junior and mid-level roles. I personally look at, is this a nice person to work with? How does this person deal with, obviously, like a stressful situation like an interview, and we're asking questions about how do you solve this problem? That's more important. So I think, like, personally, like, I go to interviews and have no idea what they're asking me about, but I just focus on presenting myself as a hopefully a nice and fun person to work with, and kind of focus on my strengths. So, like something you could do is like write down your strengths before you go to an interview and like just kind of have them in your head. Yeah. And like Salma said, the interview process here was super nice. So good luck to everyone who's interviewing, because it is stressful. I completely get that, and time consuming as well. So yeah, good luck to everyone.
I think that's a great note to wrap it up. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much to Depop. Thank you to our panelists. I know we went a little bit over past the hour, so I really appreciate everyone staying on, and to our audience. And thank you so much for sharing these. And to the audience, take a screenshot of these amazing takeaways so that you can have them, but we'll make everything available as well. Thank you so much.